Good morning. Welcome to Casual Conversations. I'm glad that you have joined us today. I'm Scott Wade, your host on Casual Conversations. Also, I'm an evangelist in the Church of the Nazarene and the president of Momentum Ministries. It's my pleasure today to welcome the retired president of Mount Vernon Nazarene University, Dr. Henry Spaulding. Good morning, Dr. Spaulding.
Good morning. I think you're the last half of that tired president of.
Did I say tired?
No, I said that's what I am. But I've had almost a year to recover though.
That's true. It's coming up. I guess graduation's behind us, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the
For Mount
5th of
Vernon.
5th of May, and then I left there for a 50-year wedding trip with my wife down to Florida, where she loves to go, and we were down there a month after that.
Wow, that's good. I know when I first retired from the pastoral ministry before we really got into Momentum in earnest, we took about 3 weeks to travel to a lot of different places, but it all included, or every one of my children were included in that. So,
Yeah.
so it's a good time to do that, right? When you first retire, because then you get busy like you've gotten.
No, not as busy as you, but I've had a few things to do.
Well, I'm glad that you've made time to be on Casual Conversations today, and I'm excited about our topic. But before we get into that, if you don't mind, just take a few minutes to introduce yourself to our listeners.
All right. Well, I was ordained in Atlanta. Decatur is really the town it was in, a suburb of Atlanta, on the Georgia district in 1981. And at that point, I was a senior pastor, which would now be called a lead pastor, but I was the only pastor of a church in Thomasville, Georgia, where I'd pastored, as you know, 2 years was the requirement back then. And then I'd done some other stuff prior to that, but not too much after that. Stephen Neese, the founding president of MVNU and the president at Eastern Nazarene College, then called me and asked me if I would be interested in coming up there to teach. Had to come up for an interview, and anyway, I did that, and I told my wife I'm going up to Massachusetts. I said, I'm going to go where the job is, and we were there a decade. And then somehow I got the pastoral itch again, and so I took a church down in Virginia, in the upstate or Northern Virginia, and then from there I went on to after 3 years there to Trevecca, there 12 years, then seminary, and now, or then I guess my former employer. Along the way, we had three children. One is a social worker in Montana, works for the Veteran Administration. I used to say to people, I do say to people, if you ever have a need in VA in that area, she's the hound of hell that will come in and get you the benefits no matter what anybody thinks. Her younger sister is a clinical supervisor, and then his son, my son has a PhD and is ordained himself now, a PhD in Christian ethics. He went to Duke before that for his master's program. And then I've been married 51 years to the love of my life. That pretty well sums up my life right there.
Well, congratulations on 51 years. We're gonna touch 45 this in just a few weeks here, but
just children.
So it sounds like you spent a lot of time in higher education.
Yeah.
And in the pastorate, in higher education, but always working in the church.
Yeah.
So you have a unique perspective. And a few weeks ago, we were talking about this podcast, and you said that one of the things that you'd like to talk about, the challenges that Christian universities are facing today.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, with everything that's going on, what a great topic, because actually we could spend episode after episode just talking about universities in general with everything that's happened this past spring and, well, really throughout the history of universities, I guess, modern history anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of challenges facing the Christian universities. So, and I want to thank you for your service too at Mount Vernon, because that's my alma mater. I graduated from there back in '79 before you came. So you said you were ordained in '81, and then when did you land in Mount Vernon?
I came in 2009 as the provost of the
Okay.
university, and I served in that role 3 years. Then I was elected president.
Okay. So thanks for making Mount Vernon having a hand in what it is today. Appreciate that, even though um, I was there and gone before you ever arrived. So, so if
Yeah.
anybody tries to blame you for me, tell them, hey,
Oh
I
no,
wasn't I wasn't there.
unless those 2 times I preached in your church, I somehow brought disaster on your house. But the
I don't
truth is
recall
that.
that.
But
Well,
anyway, you want me to talk a little bit about that for a few minutes?
not the
Well,
disaster that I do want you to talk about the Christian university and some of the unique challenges that the Christian university faces, maybe in the context of secular universities as well, and just kind of
yeah.
in general, but whatever you feel would be a help to folks that are pondering what's going on in our universities, what's going on in Christian universities, just what are some challenges we face?
Well, I think the biggest and most fundamental challenge of Christian higher education is the term university. Way back in the early church, a church father called Tertullian asked the question, "What does Jerusalem have to do with Athens?" And actually, when I was installed as president, I changed that around and said, "What does Athens have to do with Aldersgate?" Make it more of a Methodist approach, or Wesleyan approach. And his fundamental question is that you don't need philosophy, you don't need anything that has a hint of secular or liberal arts although the term liberal arts came later in history. But he asked that question, and of course he was not alone in that. And today, even like Charlie Kirk, you may or may not know that name. He's out a lot. Proud that he didn't go to college, and you've got Dennis Prager and Ben Shapiro, all of which are highly educated people in Ivy League schools, who say that the worst thing you can do is go to college now. So the best thing is not to send your child to a college. And so I think the parents and even the church are reared in a context that is anti-intellectual and anti-university education. It says it doesn't prepare you well. I heard a quote this morning, or heard just a tidbit from Charlie Kirk. He says, over 50% of the people who graduate from college 10 years after graduation aren't working in a job they needed a college degree to do, you know? Yet I think all the studies show that in the long run, the people who have a college education end up making a whole lot more financially than non-college graduates. But of course, there are exceptions and that kind of thing. So that's one thing. And then the way in which the way people conceive of faith, kind of eats away at people's impressions. So, for example, I was on the faculty for 12 years, as I told you, at Trevecca, and I was in a meeting, and we were talking about our college initiation program, and we were reading a book there that was edited by William Willimon, a well-known minister and former bishop, and now research professor at Duke Divinity School. But he said in that book, it talks about pulled together resources of how you can help a child edge from their 18th birthday to their 19th birthday without imploding, and all the way through there. And there was a quote in there from Nietzsche, who is anything but a supporter of Christianity, anything. And I read a great deal of him. And one of our very well-trained economics professors, a PhD from Vanderbilt, said, "I don't want our students reading Nietzsche." And so it gets into a lot of times people scrutinize the books, and they assume every book that you require is a book you espouse and that you want people to emulate. And so you get into book lists and those kind of things. Now, admittedly, I had some of that. I mean, I could talk about some specifics when I was at Mount Vernon, where I was dealt with or contacted by pastors and constituents and parents and that kind of thing. Most of the time, after talking to them, I was able to turn a corner with them. But I may fool myself there, but that of course is the job of a college president. Now, putting all that aside, that's just intellectual, that's theological, philosophical. There's the pressure of private higher education in general now. When I went to Trevecca as a freshman in 1970, the average, well, the tuition was $22 an hour. At ENC or Trevecca, I keep calling the other places I've been, at the MVNU, which is not the highest tuition among the Nazarene schools, it's closer to $700 to $800 an hour. And there's nobody except very wealthy people who can pay cash on the barrel. My father was not a rich man, but he was a careful person. So he paid all of our tuition right out of his checkbook. I mean, he just did that. And then he paid all of my graduate education all the way through the doctorate, because that was his commitment to us as children, and himself only a high school graduate. My mother was a school teacher with a couple master's degrees, but he was just always worked at Chevron Oil Company and as an accountant. So, the fact is, nobody can hardly afford that. And so what ends up being is that they end up not going, because that go to a state school, which, that gives them a little bit better tuition. But, there was a study when I was at the MVNU that really Mount Vernon Nazarene University graduates, they graduated with less debt than Ohio State, which is a well-known school in the state of Ohio. And so part of it is that just the facing the prospect of sending to an education, then affording that education, and then finding a way to recruit faculty who have all had to be, as I was. My PhD was from Florida State University, hardly a Christian university, but if when I first year of teaching, I said, if I looked in the class that I taught for 3 years at Florida State as a graduate assistant, 2 courses a semester. And if I looked at that group of people versus the group of people I had at Eastern Nazarene College, they were the same people dealing with the same problems without the resources that a Christian college can bring and does bring. And so it's very easy to question the faith of an academic, because they've committed themselves to a different life than a pipe fitter or an accountant, for that matter, or even a school teacher. A public school teacher. So those are all stresses in terms of how to be there. And then may talk about this later, but then there's the whole question of the cultural shift that has taken place like a tsunami over the last 5 or 6 years in the United States. And also the government intervention, the way the government has, because people can't afford it on their own, they borrow. And then a few years ago, during the Obama administration, they switched those from being loans to the bank, from a bank that was sponsored, but they all come from the federal government now. When they come from the federal government, they're accountable for all of whatever the shifts are. And we can talk about that a little bit later in the podcast as you like. But that pretty well sums up the difficulty, finding qualified faculty who think Christianly and can survive the scrutiny of people who already suspect that college is not the right way to spend your money.
And spend your money, you do.
You do.
For college education. What's driving the cost? I mean, I don't know the figures exactly, but far outpacing inflation, from $22 a credit hour to, what did you say was at Mount Vernon?
I'd say, $800 an hour.
$800.
Now,
so what's driving that cost increase?
Well, what's driving that cost is, first of all, let's just take Mount Vernon. The one I know specifically about all of these things is we had about 100 faculty members there, and then 200 staff members. Wouldn't have had that many staff members, except for the fact that you have to account to the federal government and to the accreditation agencies all of the statistics. And so you have to turn in an annual report to what's the Higher Learning Commission, which is the accrediting association, the largest of all in the United States, of how what you're doing, if you're satisfying the criteria for accreditation, that kind of thing. And also justifying to the federal government that their money given to students paid for with tax dollars is being spent well, and it's quality work. So we set up in order to do that. Now, in fact, the last one I did when I was president there, we were probably the only small college in the state of Ohio that got an accreditation report with zero findings, zero follow-up reports, completely clear slate.
Wow.
For just by comparison, I was I was in charge of when I was at Trevecca as a professor with their reaffirmation with the Southern Association. They got 25 citations that were dealt with back then. Now, it just depends on time. The Southern Association is historically more severe than most, and most of those were small things. Whenever and I've been on many accreditation visits for Higher Learning Commission and the Southern Association. Before you even can get to whether you're fulfilling your contract with a student, your learning goals and outcomes, that kind of stuff, you have to finally satisfy the 8 criteria for accreditation. And if you don't satisfy even one of those, all the rest doesn't matter. You're immediately taken out of the accreditation standards, and therefore you are put on probation or you lose your accreditation. I mean, that's happened not to a Nazarene school, but it happens to schools. And what's happened with the LGBTQ plus issue is that's become not by legislation, but by a Supreme Court decision, and then the bureaus that surround the federal government, they have shifted sexual orientation and gender identity into a civil right, and if you don't satisfy them at that point on the standards of accreditation, then you're not going to get in at all. So that has become a major tussle, compounded by the fact that the majority of the students who show up to a Nazarene school or a Christian school at all have been trained in a public school system that has been hammering away at those issues in small and big ways and aggressive ways now. So many students come who attend our churches not convinced that the issue of LGBTQ plus should be an issue at all, and that you should be able to identify with whatever gender you choose. And so you're fighting not only the constituency who are really concerned about the issue, you're confronting years and years of indoctrination of public school education that they bring with them. And you're aware, as well as I am, of this woke culture. And so many times it's not the LGBTQ plus students that you have or you're perceived to have. It's the woke students who are trying to protect that issue just in general, even though they're heterosexual and don't have a single homosexual inclination themselves. So it's a very turbulent issue, and all that you have to do to justify that and work through that requires a lot of paperwork.
So you're not only fighting the issue, fighting might not be the right word. You not only have to respond to the issue itself, but the added burden of fulfilling requirements to be accredited and to receive even the government funds of a student's tuition.
Right. Paid for with tax dollars,
So I don't know if I would describe it as walking a tightrope, but you have to really recognize the freedom of religion and your responsibility then as a recipient of federal funds. Those things sometimes, often, perhaps clash.
They do, and they do partly because of the dynamic on it. I said for years before I came a president that the Church of the Nazarene, or the college campus, is the tip of the spear of where the church has been and where it's going, and there's inherently conflict in that, and that has been amped up exponentially over the years that I've been at. The years I began in 2009. It wasn't even an issue that people talked about. It's become the litmus test for whether you're a Christian or not in the church, or a litmus test for whether you are liberal arts in secular culture. So it has so ignited and it thrives on conflict and controversy and name calling and that kind of stuff. And so we had two law firms that we retained to work with us at. We have one in Mount Vernon for local issues, and we have one in Columbus, a large firm that 300 plus attorneys, a division of which worked only with higher education. So it has become an issue where that you wouldn't have dealt with in 1982 when I started. It wasn't even up in the Boston area. And certain countries certain parts of the country are more difficult than others. Ohio's not particularly difficult because it's primarily a Republican state, but still those issues are here. I had a colleague of mine say that the Speaker of the House in the state of California is a former Nazarene raised in West Virginia who was a lesbian. And so she brings in the state of California a kind of scrutiny that you wouldn't have in Ohio or Tennessee or Oklahoma. Those are the kinds of places. But you might get in Illinois, certainly get in Boston, and you get in San Diego.
So, how do you navigate those regulations? Apparently, you spend a lot of money. You hire lawyers. You train faculty, trying to remain true to faith, but also to comply with the federal government. How do you do that?
Well, first of all, prayerfully, the truth is that I know that there's a God, and I know that He cares, and I know that He is involved in higher education, and I believe it's the great gem, the jewel of the Church of the Nazarene and of the Christian denominations in general. Although not everybody would agree with that, I believe it is a particularly great area for evangelism. What I did, how I navigated that when I was president was I tried to speak truthfully to all constituents, and it wasn't very difficult to do that because most of the people are fair-minded. And I've gotten a few emails that I put over in the folder in my email that says, if you're ever thinking real high of yourself, go to that folder and read some of the people who are assessing your leadership and assessing your morality and even your humanity. Part of that, you just have to be. One time I was getting a flu shot when I was there, and when she injected the flu serum in me, she says, "You ever got tough skin?" I said, "I need it for my job," and I'm not saying there weren't some scars there, but I didn't suffer as much as some might. I mean, there's only certain people in the world. I never thought I was that, but God helped me when I was in that job. I think the basic thing you have to do is you have to appeal to fair-minded people on both sides. I know that there was a particular, in my last year as president, there was a mother that was really not a Nazarene, but her daughter had come there and she was a full-blown lesbian. And I won't go all through the details of it, but at the end of the day, she said to me, "You know what? You have discriminated against my daughter by not making her, promoting her to a position in student government, which would have had responsibility over housing." And the reason all that came up is the picture was posted, and lots of the students kind of were mean to her. And she said to me, after she said, "You're discriminating against her," I said, "You know what? I did this for your daughter because you said that she's been hurt by the kinds of things. If I put her in that role that she wants and that others will be looking, and everything she does is going to be brought against her, and you've already said it hurt her. I'm going to pay her everything she would have gotten if she had gotten that role, but I'm not going to put her in that role. I'm doing it for her sake." And the mother just had a complete turnaround in her attitude. She says, "Well, I do appreciate that." And she loves this place. And I said, "And we want her to leave this place loving this place, and so it comes down to those kind of issues. And I've had the same thing back with Biden Trump. I mean, you had students at each other, and so we'd have to navigate that. So if you voted for Biden, you're an atheist. If you voted for Trump, you must be in favor of everything he's ever done in his life. And I said, let's apply the common sense test to this, and be reasonable about this. And most of the time, in fact, I think that's a more virulent debate than the LGBTQ plus on the campus. And I would describe Mount Vernon as primarily a Republican sanctuary for people, but not exclusively, and not always agreeing about the issue of Trump. But so those are the kinds of things you have to kind of first of all de-escalate the rigor and the emotion, and go to what is best for the students and the faculty members. And 98% of what people think the faculty saying or doing in class aren't true. When you bring those two together, it makes it possible for you to say, no, they're not. As I said earlier, I alluded earlier, critical theory has been a big issue there. And the truth is, there isn't a single person, there isn't a single Marxist that teaches at any Nazarene school I know of. And so the fact is, if you could just de-escalate that and help people to see through the smoke, they can see that they share a common concern. And there's not a single person at NVNU, and in the faculty at least, that don't want the best for their students. They're not going to hurt the students. And so if you can bring that together and humanize it, I'm not saying I did it very well, but I did it for 11 years. And I've got the scars to prove it. But ultimately, we were able to navigate that fairly well.
Good. Well, we're going to have to finish up here, but there were a couple more things I wanted to ask you about.
Try and give you a shorter answer for those.
Okay. No, that's good. I like these answers. Let's look into the future a little bit. What are the unique opportunities as in the whole realm of higher education? What are the unique opportunities for the Christian university going forward?
I think that when people see what's happened at Columbia, at Yale, I think even Ohio State, but not nearly as briefly, but at the California schools, I think they're going to take a hard look and say, if you want somebody to learn instead of being indoctrinated with some sort of ideology, you better go to a Christian university, because the people there are not trying to, certainly they're doing it from a Christian point of view, but they're going to let you read Shakespeare without having to read into it some sort of hyper feminist Marxist analysis of it, And so I think the Christian university provides both, and it's been proven by survey that even LGBTQ students are safer on Christian college campuses than they are on state school or Ivy League schools. It's a place where it's safer to be. It's a place where you don't need to have to be on the guard of your heart all the time. So I do think that there's a great opportunity for Christian colleges if the federal government will allow them to do it. And that's the wild card. Mm-hmm. I got a whole lot more to say on that than we have time to say.
It's a better environment, more compassionate and loving. Well, real quickly, as we conclude today, I have 12 grandchildren, and I've got them in Memphis, I've got them in Detroit, and in Charleston, South Carolina. One is just a newborn, and the other one is the oldest is making decisions now about higher education, her and her parents. What would you say to a young person that's preparing to go to college? You talked about people are saying don't go to college, but I think I hear you that it's going to be best for you if you do, in most cases, if you're able to. What would you say to a young person to prepare for college?
I'd say go there to listen more than talk, for one thing. Sometimes students bring their own agenda and they don't want the faculty to disabuse them of that. Go there and planning to engage in the full university, not just the classroom or not just the sports program or the chess club we had online gaming that we did. Had to be careful about that, but were able to do it and have done were very successful at that, and still are, as far as I know. But go there planning to be a part of the system, a part of the culture, and go there to learn before and not just to react. Be careful what you say to people on outside about some particular issue. Any sentence, even this podcast today, somebody could take one sentence out of it or two sentences and make it look entirely different than what the whole podcast looks like. So from my point of view, go there prepared and remind yourself the whole time you're there to get an education, but that education is sometimes co-curricular and not just curricular. Enjoy yourself, and then maintain a strong connection to a local congregation while you're in college, so that you're there to hear to the means of to be a part of the means of grace, and to be a part of that fellowship. You'll bless them and they'll bless you. I mean, there's probably a lot of other things to say, but the problem most of the time with college students now is they come already knowing what they're supposed to believe, or their parents do, and they don't give the opportunity for godly men and women to reach down into the lives of the students that they care about, and help form them. At MVNU, we talked a great deal about character. And a lot of people say, well, why don't you say Christ? Well, Christ had a character, a Christian character, the character of Christ. So those are the kinds of things that I think I would say to them. And allow yourself to enjoy your life while you're there. It's probably, as David Brooks said one time, when you go to university, it's one of the last times in your life that really smart people will pay a lot of attention to what you write and say. You know,
Yeah. Go to listen, go to learn, go to experience the whole gamut, and
yeah.
be involved. I love that part. Be involved in a local congregation. Uh, I guess that wasn't one that I would have anticipated, but how important that is, and have a good time. You know,
And you can do that. You
yeah,
can do that on a Christian college campus without worrying about guns and the violence that you do a lot of times in state universities. Now they're not all that way. Don't want to. I got a PhD from one of them, and I'll tell you, the students I taught during those years were as often in my office with tears in their eyes as they dealt with the stresses and strains of things. And I was just a TA then, working on my PhD. But that's going to, I know over the years as a college professor, the opportunity to speak into the specific challenges of college students, the university students' lives, was one of the greatest things, privileges I ever had.
well, let me pray for our Christian universities today.
Do that.
Father, I thank you for Dr. Spaulding. Thank you for the investment that he has made in countless young lives. I pray, Lord, that those investments would pay dividends in the kingdom and in our world as young people who are fully committed to Christ go out to change their world, to make an impact. Pray that you would bless Dr. Spaulding and Sharon as they enjoy these years. And God, help us as Church of Jesus Christ. Help us to value education, to value preparation, to value truth and knowledge. And Lord, to as we learn from it, to shape our lives to be more like Jesus. I pray this in his name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Spaulding, for being with us. I really do appreciate it.
It's been my privilege. Good to talk to you again.
Thanks. And thank you to all who are listening in on Casual Conversations today. We appreciate our listeners. Go to our website at Momentum Ministries if you would, or you can donate online through this podcast and help support our ministry. We would appreciate that. God bless you. Have a great day.